And everyone, welcome. Sorry we're late. Had internet difficulties, and I got that straightened out. It was just super fun to be like, oh, we're ready to start a stream, and then nothing works, and then lots of troubleshooting later. I just unplugged it and plugged it back in. It seemed to work. So awesome stuff there. That's what your tech support needs to hear. Just unplug it and plug it back in. It always works that way. Today, PulseChain Warchest, also AMA. Put the question in the chat. We don't have a lot of time though. We got about an hour or so. We're gonna go maybe 50 minutes actually. And a lot of interesting stuff, though. I was fascinated. Tanto Nomini, he prefers, went through a thread of the different kinds of moves, and it has a whole Excel spreadsheet and stuff that he calls it the PulseChain Warchest, which I love as well because it's a very good way of describing it. We talked about the Hedron Warchest. We talked about the mystery box stuff, too, with Maximus projects as well, which is always fun in the past. But the PulseChain one, the one that's money has moved around a little bit. Again, these people are all our best friends. So that's the fun part. But looking at what they're actually doing through chain analysis, open source intel, transparency, free information, give them better information than what they can pay for otherwise. That's what we're going to do today. It's going to be really fun. Plus, we got a new gentleman on stream that I met at the PulseChain meetup recently. Going to introduce him as well. Let's bring him in first. OG Mike, what's happening, man? What's happening?
What's up?
OG Mike came across you at the meetup the other day and said, yeah, maybe we'll stream some and talk PulseChain and otherwise. So how's it going?
It's been good. Life's good.
It's been good. Yeah, we you get to come on the episode with the PulseChain Warchest. You excited to figure out where all the money you should have no expectations of ever may or may not go to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it'll be fun. All right, let's bring in the next guest. Dipcatcher Radio. What's happening?
Back again. What's up?
Back again. He's got a shirt on today, and he has limited pair of sunglasses, maybe on the table, maybe not. But his hair is looking good, and he's back in the room, looking fresh, man. Oh, he does. He's got him. Only for the 7th time on the show. Welcome back.
Good.
Yeah, it seems like you've been doing a lot of naughty stuff, man. You've been following the open source trail. That's not how the blockchain works, sir. That's not how it works. So I don't know why you're doing stuff like that, but. What I'll pull up your thread here in a second, but what made you interested in this kind of stuff and all that?
Mainly just I was trying to look for any type of indicators on anything related to the pools, I guess. And I had kind of looked at these in the past, and I was curious to see if anything had changed. I wanted to see if anything had been bridged over. I was trying to piece together if there's any way to know beforehand, which pools were going to be incentivized. So yeah, I was just kind of digging through that, and I wanted to see how much, if any of those funds have been bridged over. I was just kind of, just curiosity mainly. And there's it's a lot of the things that I had kind of laid out there, it's stuff that people had known, or people tweet oh, they did this, but it's I really wanted to, lay out all the addresses, all the, just all the actions, and try to just paint a picture of kind of what's happened with that.
Did you have more or less expectations after your analysis?
Probably, the same, I guess. My expectations are always that nothing positive is going to happen as a result. So I guess to kind of take that all the way, I expect all 350 billion hex to be dumped on both chains. I get, that's on the worst case.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. So, but that's it, it's in general, I try to make it where what I think will happen, I try to lean closer to the opposite of what I personally want to happen. I feel like framing everything around okay, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen, especially when it's things that you don't control, because whoever owns those keys, it's their money, and everything is entirely their choice. So
exactly.
But I do think it's been pretty well managed. I think that the whole they because everyone points to the billions of dollars raised, but it's most of that was in hex, and most of it came from the OA, and so it like what I consider the money to be raised, I consider it to be the roughly $700 million of stable coins that ended up in that address. And so that's in where like all the ETH, all the Bitcoin, like all the other assets that aren't Hex got sold. And so that's the figure that I consider to be, raised. And so, and of that amount raised, only about 10% ever left. Like, 90% of the non-Hex assets still sit there. In stable coins, having done nothing. The only actions that were taken were some liquidity providing early on, which is actually kind of interesting to look at that, because that position is actually down bad. Something like 80% losses from that liquidity position. And then they during that whole issue with USDC, they consolidated all the USDC and Tether into DAI, and I think made a couple $1 million just like in the price action on that day. So
remember that.
So it's a pretty, overall pretty well managed in terms of, most of the funds just sitting there still, alleviating some risk with some USDC, and providing some liquidity on that Hex pair. It's kind of, which is, the fees have actually been pretty substantial. So
I think a lot of people there's so many different entities too. There's OA, there's the sacrifice wallets, there's the different sacrifices, there's all these different entities too. But before we get into, I'll bring up the tweet in a second. Before we get way into it though, we're about to deep dive. OG Mike, you want to introduce yourself real quick, just so people are familiar. Maybe you've seen your work before, seen you around the community, and then I'll bring up. We'll dive into the millions of dollars that we have no expectations of.
Sure. My name is Mike, and I'm the founder of PulseX. Some of you might heard of it, some of you may not. But I'm a day one hexagon as well. I got followed by Richard, if that means anything. But he
retweeted me today, so
yeah.
That it happens from time to time. If you do good stuff, sometimes he'll what do you call it? Shine the light on, not expose you. That's probably not a good way to say it. He'll shine the light. He'll promote your work more. Yeah.
Definitely. No, I'm just kidding. So, I'm just trying to build stuff on blockchain and trying to build my legacy, and hopefully one day we could all succeed together. Yeah.
Well, I met you at the PulseChain meetup, and when I don't meet a lot of people who've been around following Richard for 4, 5, 6 years, day one, all this stuff too. So you two together, I know, Dipcatcher, how long have you been following Richard? I forget.
Actually, a month right before Hex launch. So
okay, so you a month before Hex launch, and then Dipcatcher, was it before Hex? Dipcatcher?
Yeah, it was I think late 2017.
Okay, yeah, I was around the same time
when I first got into crypto.
Yeah, I first got into crypto late 2016, and I found Richard, I want to say early 2017 sometime. So very cool, very cool. So
yeah, I think everyone started in January of 2017.
Really? Okay, I never thought about when is so it's Twitter, his Twitter account. Okay, yeah, that makes sense too, because I did some historical stuff on it before, but I didn't realize. Okay, so anyways, everyone watching, all of us, none of us are new. We've been here a long time, and that's another reason I like to talk openly. Transparency, it's all on the blockchain. A lot of people are like, oh, don't talk about this or that, may be misused. Well, I think my approach in general is, if it's already out there, we're not saying anything, nobody can't find themselves. I think it's more interesting and probably more beneficial for the community to know about this stuff, to understand it more, to even actually create less FUD and stuff around it. So that's why I think it's important to talk about the stuff with a lot of things in PulseChain too, not just money that may or may not be moved around, which again, does not benefit you in any way, shape, or form. So like Dipcatcher said, assume it's all going to zero, and maybe you'll sleep better. I guess if you can, there's more nuance than that to it, but yeah, I could probably say that better. Anyways, now that you guys know Mike, you guys know Dipcatcher is a founder of a ton of, I don't want to say Maximus products anymore. You and Goldkey just create a ton of stuff. Like it's like every week there's like 3 new products or 3 new Anvil websites. I'm like, what is going on with these guys? Do you guys, do you eat? Do you sleep? Do you breathe? Do you just is all that just go into just PulseChain? Hey, here's an idea. Let's do it. And then it's kind of amazing what you guys do. So shout out.
Yeah. I mean, I guess a lot of sleep is kind of sacrificed, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's just with PulseChain being so new, there's just so much low hanging fruit like, high impact things, like really helpful tools. And so it's not like, we're just sitting there coming up with crazy ideas. It's like, okay, what does PulseChain need, or what could benefit PulseChain users? So that's kind of been the thing. And it's just kind of fun to make stuff.
Yeah, you guys ship. I respect. I mean, you guys ship. You ship stuff a lot. You shipped a lot, and you don't do sacrifice phases. Again, extra respect for that. Nothing against anyone who does sac phases or otherwise, but I'm like, people who don't, and there's just either free claims or swaps or all the stuff you guys do for tokens and building on the derivatives. I've talked about this a million times, but like that is rare, cool, and you could tell it's more easy to tell people's intentions when they're doing things without like, obviously like it's gonna, you guys believe in the product, so you're building stuff on top of it to benefit yourselves later. Like that's a great thing to do, but it's not like you're just deviating and doing all this other stuff, which then you kind of got to look at, okay, how much utility does it have, all that stuff too. With all your stuff that you can go keep build, it's like clear utility. So it's super rare. You guys are something else. Yeah, of course, man. All right, let's get into it though. Break it down. Can you introduce though to the different entities? Because I think a lot of people get confused. What's the OA versus the SAC wallets versus everything else? Can you just kind of frame this around the different actors?
Yeah. So the OA is the address in hex that gets the copy of the early unstake penalties or late unstake penalties. And it also got a copy of the bonuses during the mint. And so people, when they talk about OA, they usually just mean, whoever they think created hex or, people kind of lump in Richard with OA, but, there's really no way to prove that it is or is not him personally. It could be, some other entity. It could be, it could be any number of things, in terms of who controls those private keys. But the OA itself is a private key. It's an address that has, gets the hex from those penalties. And also in hex, which I think people a lot of times bundle into the OA, there's an address called the flush address. And the flush address is where the ETH got sent to from the hex adoption amplifier. So those two are separate. I haven't done a full analysis on the flush address. I think that's probably the most interesting one. The OA, it's kind of, everyone knows what happens. It's distributed, hex to various wallets, and all that hex is just done is sit there. So I think some of it has been staked, but then, all the liquid hex ended up just basically in the PulseX sacrifice. So I guess there's not too much. I mean, I haven't really looked in deeply into like all the threads there, but the OA is basically just distributed the hex. The flush address, I think, is a lot more interesting because if you remember right away, ETH was dispersed in 1,337 increments to a handful of addresses, and that was when ETH was like, I think like $100 or so.
200.
So now that's gone up a lot, but I mean, you saw some of those being sent to, I think Kraken was the exchange that I saw this sent to. I haven't really followed up on any of those addresses, but so there are those two addresses in hex, and then but I think people generally lump them all into OA. But then with the sacrifice, there's the PulseChain sacrifice address and then the PulseX sacrifice address. And then there were all the addresses that received transactions directly from either of those two addresses, which there's really no way you can't know who those are. But there were some patterns that I picked up on in looking at all the addresses that received from either of those two addresses, that makes me believe that they're all the addresses listed there are part of the same just operation. So, so with that, there were, some like PulseX ended up with most of the hex because the PulseChain sacrifice sent all the hex that was in there to the PulseX one. But interestingly enough, it wasn't included in the PLSX distribution. I don't know where that however many trillion PLSX it had earned actually ended up. But if you look back at like old versions of the sacrifice checker, the PulseChain sacrifice address was credited with a lot of PulseX. But then after some time, those those, you know, how it like that sacrifice checker shows the like what version. You can look at the versions. At some point, one of the versions, it just stops including the PulseChain address. So I know there's some other addresses that were related to the AMM bot that you know had a bunch of PulseX, so maybe it was distributed there. But I'm not really too sure about that. But the, you know, PulseChain had sent to a handful of different addresses, and the PulseX had sent to a handful of different addresses. And the common thread was that all the coins that were not Hex got sold into either ETH or stable coins. Almost all of the ETH, what was it, 16,400 ETH was sent out through Tornado Cash. And all the stable coins just sit there. And the only action that's been taken was some trading, like consolidating into DAI in March. And since then, there's been no other actions. So one interesting thing about the PulseX, or no, this was funds coming out of the PulseChain sacrifice. A lot of REN BTC was minted. So I think a lot of Bitcoin went into that. And then so REN BTC would be minted and then, you know, sold for ETH or sold for USDC. And then one of those like sub addresses put in like a $2.6 million liquidity position in Hex on the Hex USDC pair. And when you look at the chart on Hex, the price that it was like pretty like below the, like, because that was when the price had started dipping. It was between like what 3 and like 3.5 and 5 cents or so. Yeah, it says right there. And then so there was basically a big buy order sitting there, and it didn't get hit for a while. Then finally, like a couple months later, price started testing that. And so since that liquidity position has been there, price has gone back and forth through it like 5 times. It went down, up, and now back down. And so now that price is below that liquidity position, which used to be USDC, now that liquidity position is entirely Hex. So there's like 66 million Hex that's basically sitting for sale in that liquidity position because price is now below that. And so that was pretty interesting, kind of the liquidity moves.
What was the point in doing the liquidity on that? Like, what was the goal, you think?
I don't know. It's like part of me thinks that maybe it was to just, you know, inject some liquid, almost like an airdrop. It's like, you know, an airdrop via liquidity injection. You know, it's like just a way to, you know, it's like $27 million was given to, you know, medical research. You know, a lot of Hex was absorbed. So maybe I think just in tandem with like absorbing all that liquid Hex and then introducing some liquidity there, maybe the intent was to, you know, maybe try to create some type of price floor, which didn't actually hold. So I think, you know, and now that there really hasn't been any type of liquidity injection from these addresses into PulseChain, it actually makes me think that that was a pretty important learning experience, that like there's almost no hope in trying to redirect price. And so to me, that's kind of proof that like really like that OA or any of these entities really don't have control over the price as much as people might think they would, because, you know, in things like that, which, you know, may be like an attempt to, you know, try to, you know, sway price, it's just overwhelmed by the market. And so, you know, because
testing influence, testing
theories.
Yeah.
And also if you're propping up the price, like somewhere where the market doesn't want the price to be, then, you know, it can get corrected. And so I think that was actually a pretty valuable learning experience for them, was that, you know, maybe it kind of falls outside of their responsibility to try to put some curb on like the downside. And so, so that was, I thought that was pretty interesting. And then also related to that, there's an address that had put in liquidity, like $10 million of liquidity at similar range. Price never reached there, but then they removed the liquidity and then sold that USDC for ETH and then sent that out to through Tornado Cash. So I think maybe at that point in time, I don't know if they just, needed liquid funds and, for whatever. And just, decided to pull that liquidity position. But pretty wild.
Yeah. Is there anything through your research too that became a theme of them trying, maybe testing theories, trying to see if there's any influence in the market, but also, is there anything that looked like it would be good for Hexagons or bad? Like, is there something that some of these moves, do they look like benevolent type of moves, or did you get any like feeling from either the outcome or the intention?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the two main things are that all that hex is still sitting there. So 350 billion hex just sitting there. Like there's one address that received 1 billion of it, which I didn't know if that, like, at first I thought, because I remember seeing that when it happened. And I was like, okay, maybe that's like what they're going to bridge over, but no bridging has taken place. I mean, like I said, no actions has taken place for now, like 5 months, April, May, June, almost July. So almost 4 months. And so, that I think it would be benevolence. And I mean, just sitting on the stables, I think that kind of puts to rest how the, like, how like just people when they FUD, they're like, oh, Richard stole $1 billion from, and it's like, well, is really like 700 million and 618 million of it is still sitting there. So, it's not like he took all that money and ran. It was like, okay, like what at the time was like 50 million of ETH is now 30 million of ETH had been sent through Tornado Cash. So I think that had to have gone to the developers working on it, other expenses. And I personally think that, of course I have no idea. It's impossible to tell. I personally think that like the flexing and all the, like the expensive paraphernalia, I think that was purchased with the ETH that came into the Hex launch through the adoption amplifier. Like that's and so I think that, but maybe, but there's really no telling, and maybe there's not even a difference between the two sources of funds when you really think about it. But as far as like the sacrificed funds, only 10% of it actually left these wallets.
I always assumed that all of the personal purchases were just from his already rich fund of money and all that. I always assumed that. I mean, of course, couldn't prove that, couldn't prove otherwise, but like that's what I always assumed, at least. I don't know. I never thought about him actually spending the money through any kind of adoption amplifier or sacrifice phase on Prada. But I mean, if he did, I wouldn't be mad either. But I always assumed like, yeah, rich guy's already rich. He's just trying to spend more of the money that he has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we finally know where the ETH went, Richard? Where did the ETH go, Richard? This is a spreadsheet. Can you point me exactly where the ETH went? Do we know the answer?
So the ETH that wasn't sold into stables that are now sitting there, that went through Tornado Cash. So there's really no way to tell. Maybe like you could sleuth around, because I mean it must have been a pretty substantial like portion of the funds in Tornado Cash. I mean, I don't know the Tornado Cash volume, but it's actually kind of amazing. This, like, if you look at some of those addresses, it's literally just like a wall of 100 ETH transactions into Tornado Cash. So that was pretty wild to see. And that was, I think, before all the legal issues with the Tornado Cash founder kind of started happening, and before exchanges started kind of blacklisting addresses that were related to it. So I really honestly, like, I don't even know if like what the outcome was from those, like, because what if you're sending the Tornado Cash to like, one of the developers working on it, and they try to deposit it on an exchange and their account gets flagged or something. So like, I don't really know what the outcome is there. And maybe that, that amount was like an attempt to kind of conceal it so that it could be, used for anything, maybe speculating in the ecosystem, or maybe injecting liquidity where, you don't necessarily want people to like know or think it's you. So I really don't know. Maybe it's some balance of that. Maybe, somewhat to payroll for the developers working on it. Some, maybe some of that did end up in PulseChain, and you'll never know who it was. So yeah, I mean, once it hits the tornado cash, I just assume that it's spent, however it may be.
Yeah. Mike, too, what do you think, because the pitcher in this tweet thread said, what do you think will happen with all this money? I would ask that, OG Mike, what do you think? Do you think there's any plans, liquidity providing or otherwise?
I think, first of all, the most important thing is those stable is still inside the address. So I think it's a huge boost of confidence from the community. Like we see that those stables are not being used or not being used yet to pump the price of PulseChain. So that's a good sign. So basically that means the price action that we're having right now is basically within the community. So why? So I think the ETH from hacks, probably a portion of it is being used to kickstart the pump of hacks. I think that's my thought on that. Probably like I don't know, 10% of it or something like that. And other ETH are going to use to have a lot of development in the future for PulseChain as well. So, but I think the ETH, it's not the most important thing from AA lobby. I think the stable coin is the most important factor, whether it's being used or not in the future, because it's whenever those stable being moved, even a small portion of it, it will become a huge news within the community, and people will start speculating: are they gonna being used to pump PulseX or PHAX or whatever? And but I think this type of narratives or this type of news won't come until the late bull market. I mean, like probably like until late 2024 or 25, something like that. So yeah.
But the catcher too, so if he did want to help Hex in some way or help PulseChain or PulseX LP, I know that it was 2%. I was talking to Dylan from Fiat Fatty, all that the other day, and he was saying 2% of the AMM bot, only 2% of that liquidity AMM bot scooped up had they even been deployed on PulseX. So is there, like, what are the ways, Tornado Cash is gone now, or maybe there's a private one, or maybe there's one coming to PulseChain, but how would these things, or like what are the most, like, how would they be used to help the community if they were to chose to do that?
Yeah, I mean, no telling what they'll do. I think that probably the most effective thing to do would be to not try to make any type of bottom in the market, because, like, if you think about it, the reason why Hex really succeeded as a community was that there was a substantial number of people that got in at really low prices, and then they experienced good upside, and then that turned them into, crazed advocates for the system. And if he was to try to just put some bottom in to, kind of to appease the people that are already in, who are, just praying for a pump, it kind of limits the number of people that can experience really high upside. And so I think that, like, letting a bottom form more naturally, I think, is probably the best long-term strategy, because it allows there to be some critical mass of people that get in at really low prices that, can kind of turn into that, like, really, really diehard group. And then I think that it's probably best used kind of towards the tail end of, or even like middle to tail end of a bull cycle.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's the thing that really draws attention. Like, if those funds were used to form some bottom, no one cares. But if those funds were used to take a 1,000x move into a 100,000x move, that's something that can get attention. And it's like a way to kind of like reward the people that participated. And, because it's always good, because, like, probably like the biggest, like, kind of the negative impact of, like, the bull cycle in Hex was that it was mainly smaller accounts that were really driving the price up way at the end. And it kind of sucks when the pump happens at the expense of the person without much money. It's awesome when the pump happens at the expense of someone who can afford to overpay. And it's like, so I think that that's probably like the best case. The most strategic thing would be not to try to create any bottom, like let the bottom form. And then, if they were to ever be deployed in like a more like offensive way, that should be like to kind of put the cherry on top and to kind of bask in the glory. And also, like that is like the reason why price goes up so much and then comes back down is because when the people that bought at the top then sell, that's like really like mega downwards. But if it's an account that like doesn't ever really need to sell and like truly doesn't need to sell, not like how Godwhale doesn't need to sell. Like I'm talking about like, basically just like injecting, it's like it'd be like an airdrop. It's like, it'd be an airdrop to all PulseChain people. Some people would capitalize on it and they'd have a realized airdrop. Other people might sit on it and they have a paper airdrop, but buying a lot of the supply later on in the cycle to really drive it up, that's like a source of supply that is less likely to come back on the market on the sell side. And so I think that's probably would be the best use of it, not bailing out any type of bear market. Because if you get a bear market bailout, then it's like the bear market never ended. But if, it's like a natural bear market ending and then that's used to kind of put the cherry on top, I think that's probably best.
I remember him saying so many times, like, basically stuff around like hoping that, let all these things happen, let the bear market in so we can go into bull. I remember so many different streams over the last, it streamed for a while, but the ones before that, he was just like, it kind of meets the ethos of like, okay, bear has to happen, but then, so if he doesn't need the money and, we believe it wouldn't be, just selfishly use your island or whatever like that, is that the play is basically fuel in the bull market. Like that is the way, one way or another, deploying it in a way that maybe not influences as much as just supports. And the 10,000x meme comes back to life. God, that'd be cool.
And I remember vividly from a very old stream, he's talking about Hex at the time. He's like, what if someone with a lot of money just mooned the price just to brag? And so like, I think that these thoughts are already in his head. And, but, in some ways I am kind of surprised that there's been nothing has happened with these funds since the launch, but maybe it's just like there's like a long-term plan for these, or maybe like something else that was interesting is that, like there was a liquidity, like when the liquidity was pulled there, like on that day, let's see on the spreadsheet, I think it's like OX51B. It's like where it minted a true shit ton of Ren BTC and Ren Doge, sold it off for ETH and USDC, and talking about those liquidity moves. I was trying to look at like the dates on some of these things and link them to like what was going on in the ecosystem at the time. And when he pulled the liquidity on 126, there was then a 5-day period with no tweets. So perhaps these keys are like, they're stored in a way that's just like not really accessible. Like you really have to go out of your way to get to these keys. And so maybe that's, part of why there just hasn't been much action on these, is that it might be a true pain in the ass to actually, access these keys and do anything with them. So, that there may be some of that influences kind of the infrequent activity.
I think we talked about the OA and stuff before, and just all the entities that have all this stuff. It almost seems like it would make sense for it to be an organization or a company. And it wouldn't even be one person. It would just be protected by all these different layers and like hard to get to, as you said, and just different layers of legal protection and stuff as well. And then like almost like a trust, that kind of thing, where it's like, you have to jump through hoops to get to it or not get to it as well. So, interesting if it was like a mix of like maybe some of the funds are like totally protected by something that makes it hard to get to, and then some of them are maybe could be used for fuel in a bull market, or just being benevolent acts of any kind. Is there any chance, the question for both of you, is there any chance in your mind that all the pain, all all just the wallowing of just like despair of the price go down below sack rate and PulseChain launch, and everyone's like, oh, nothing's working perfectly. I believe it's all part of a plan. I think it'll be rolled out over time. New features for PulseX will come over time to make sure keep giving you a little bit more of the carrot to keep you interested. But is there any chance in your all's mind that there won't be glory for PulseChain? Like, does looking at these kind of stats give you that kind of confirmation of like, oh my gosh, like if we believe in benevolent wells at all, like this is extremely bullish, or like what? How do you all think about that?
I think I might have an unpopular opinion on that, but I truly feel like this is the right direction for PulseChain right now. That Richard tried to sort of promote other coins on PulseChain, because that's the only way that we could get to the glory that we want. So if we just being echo chamber within our community, there's no way that could happen. And actually, I would be pretty scared if it's keeps on like that. Instead of Richard start promoting or start reaching with other community like Pepe or like Sheep or whatever, right? And whenever you bring those people in within the community or like within the ecosystem, then they will have a chance. I mean, they could dump all the free coins that they want, but even if there's like 10% or like even 5% of that community stays in the ecosystem, they will bring in more money in. And eventually, when they found out that the ETH gas fee is so freaking high, and they might say, hey, why don't I just bridge over my assets and just play around within PulseChain? And I think that's the ultimate goal. That's the end goal of every successful blockchain is we don't limit ourselves. We kind of buy into the narratives that we have to have a growth of blockchain populations in order to have a good price chart. And that's a fact in my opinion. So, and also I want to bring up the OA thing, when if Richard will ever use the fund to pump the price. I think eventually he will, but right now he wants to do some experiment to test the whole ecosystem, to test the whole community, or even the people from outside, if they are willing to come to PulseChain and play the game together. So what I'm seeing right now is definitely positive, like positive after positive, because that's what people want eventually. They just want to gamble. They just want to do degenerate stuff, and only a small portion of people know about investing or like long-term thinking, and that's the fact. And we couldn't change what people think, because that's their mentality, that's their philosophy, and we are not going to change that. But at least we could provide something that could benefit them and mainly ourselves, because if we provide a safer playground, if we provide such an awesome ecosystem, a blockchain for them to use, and at the same time they could help us to prompt the price of the native token, then why not, right? And eventually Hacks, PulseX, or whatever coins that we like, the projects that we like, will eventually pump due to hard slow as well. So I think that's the game that Richard was playing right now, and I don't want to kind of make it so evil that the stuff or like all the bad narratives that's coming, like he was trying to dump the price intentionally or whatever. But I think this is a good position for us in the long run, because no matter how hard he tried to promote Hacks, Pulse, there's only certain people out from the outside would listen to him. So whether he was a really good person, he's like I don't know, like Jesus Christ, even Jesus Christ, I mean,
Santa Claus
won't be able to, he won't able to convince everyone to listen to him. So why would we think like he could do that? So instead of telling people what to do, we kind of agree to them and we play with them. And when we start build a relationship together, then they might be able to think, hey, this Richard guy is sounds pretty awesome. Why don't I just use his stuff or buy his token? And
we incentivize them.
Exactly. So that's the direction that we're gonna push forward for our whole community. Yeah.
Well, that's why I put up this tweet too from Dipcatcher about just speaking the community coins too, about there being even some plays around wanting to incentivize having the copies to incentivize the different farms and communities and stuff coming in. Dipcatcher, if you want to talk about that or speak to that point as well. But WBTC, we saw Pepe, we saw the other ones come into Aave, not Aave Farms. Aave Farm? Not yet. Maybe you just tweeted about it. But is there a way for these war chest type stuff to incentivize communities coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how, like, just having, well, I mean, so like what happened with WBTC, like they, through the AMM bot, this showed me that the AMM bot was much broader in scope than what kind of what was really talked about, where it was minting, basically like it was buying up the sell side of all these ETH pairs by minting ETH or by minting Pulse mint swap, just to, which basically like drove the price up on that pool until there was like none available there, and then pulled the liquidity so that it had the, so like basically the people that had those liquidity positions, it's like they got a very small Pulse airdrop, and then then this address ended up with the AMM bot ended up with all the PRC20s, and so. But this showed that it was beyond just like the normal liquidity pools. And in this case, it had gotten these from the Aave contract. And so what that means is that, like, using the mechanism of just being able to mint the supply, it was able to, like, if you look at I think there's a picture of one of the transactions that shows how it actually got it. Not that one. I think the first image left. One more. Yeah, so it was like through a complicated string of, like, something that, like, I feel like it's people who are like hackers, like people that exploit DeFi contracts, or people that do like really sophisticated miner extracted value scripts. I feel like someone like that must be working with Richard on these types of things, like to be able to extract, through like not like a plainly obvious, like swapping everything on one side of a pool. That's kind of plainly obvious. Like when you have that lever, like the lever that they have is the ability to mint, mint PLS and then buy before the chain is live. But like to be able to do all this other stuff,
looks like a tool, right? Like some kind of sophisticated tooling to, like,
yeah, that's like, you're writing, custom smart contracts that, like, I mean, it says right there, it's a smart contract that is doing that. So, that was, that to me means that the scope of that was much broader than what was kind of originally, kind of framed. Maybe because, like, it's like every single contract would be different. And there's probably a handful of ones that were like worth going after, like maybe Aave, and I think maybe some of the curve pools or something. But, so that was pretty interesting to me, just kind of how it, even from things where it wasn't just sitting in the liquidity pool, was able to extract that value from there. So, and I guess it's better that that ends up, well, I don't know, because like all the WBTC ended up in a liquidity pool. And when it's in a liquidity pool, it means it's for sale. So it's like, it's not like dumping the price, but it's like there as supply. So, do
you mean that they could add into the pool whenever they want?
Well, it's more like when that 41,000 wrapped Bitcoin was put in the liquidity pool, it's now for sale. So like anyone can come and buy it.
Yep.
And so maybe that was just like a move to not, like, let these things just like run, maybe. But so I was, and maybe it's just like a test to see kind of what happens. And I don't know like how effective like in terms of like an onboarding, like what's like the net outcome of like an incentivized pool that, kind of creates a short-term price bump because people want to mine the ink, so it's, and the people who are running the price up are people who are kind of already in the system. They're just like, and it's not, I don't know if it's new funds coming in, but it's mainly just relocation of other, putting Pulse, buying, the native wrap BTC with Pulse, maybe that was driving it up. But then, as the people who got the airdrops, now decide to move, like, I guess the thing to measure is, how, like, as a result of these incentivized pools to try to reach new audiences, what's the net inflows versus net outflows from that user cohort? Like, are people with their copies who then get incentivized, are they in aggregate putting more money in, or are they extracting money out? And like what we've seen from both the WBTC one and also the Pepe one is that it's usually like a small handful of users who capture most of that value.
The farm went from like hundreds of percent of APR yesterday to it was like 9% this morning, I think I checked. So what happened there? Was it just like everyone came in and just like robbed the real one? Like, I don't even.
Oh, you mean the ink rewards?
Yeah, so the farm with the Pepe, I'll go to PulseX.
Yeah, so it was set from 500 of those allocation points to be 5. So it's basically turned to like almost 0.
Oh, so they just turned the multiplier down.
Yeah.
I think.
But what was the strategy in that?
I think I don't know. I have no, maybe to. Like,
I have a thought.
What do you think?
So, I think the chess move for Richard was trying to absorb all the liquidity from the holders. Like whenever they got a free drop, they tend to hold it, right? And whenever they see there's some free money, they'll tend to sell it, right? Just like what happened to Uniswap or whatever, whenever there's an airdrop. So I think the chess move for Richard was to absorb all the liquidity, and when the bull run comes, he will make some of the token turn into parity. So let's say for Pepe or like even for BTC. So, and whenever there are couples, or let's say 2 to 3 coins that was constantly in parity, that would drive a lot of attention from the other community to join PulseChain. So it doesn't have to be a lot, like 2 to 3 legit one, let's say Pepe. Because right now, even for Pepe, it was like close to 1-0 less than the real price. So it was kind of close to parity already, even though the LP size is not that big, but it's kind of indicate the fact that it is possible. So if there's enough people getting in, of course, like if there's enough people selling it, then Richard will try to implement the plan that some of them could turn into parity for a short period of time. And that could drive a lot of attention and build really good narratives that this is the biggest airdrop ever. Because right now it's just no more free money. It's actually tradable. It's actually doable that I could have 2 similar amount of access on both chain, on ETH and on PulseChain. So that could drive a lot of attention. But that's just my.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's been a wild ride for Mr. Pepe and the BTC. I mean, all the multipliers, either they got changed or because of liquidity. Yeah, liquidity went way down too, and he was $1 million yesterday. So I was going to ask before we wrap up too, because we just got a few more minutes. Is there a way to? I feel like I've went across this before. Is there a way to check the bridge for how much liquidity for each token? Is there? Or check on PulseChain? Just check the bridge contract.
Yeah, so if you want to look at the funds that have gone into PulseChain, look at the it's called Eternal Proxy Storage contract. Look at that on Etherscan. Yeah.
On Etherscan.
Yeah, because that's the funds that have gone inwards.
What's it called again?
And I don't know. So let's see. You'll okay. Just look at like search hex on Etherscan. Do you know roughly how? And then go to holders. So I think it's like going to be one of the larger holders. Yeah, I think OX. Maybe it's the OX17.
Okay, because contract.
And is that so? Click on the. So that's still hex. So click where it says filtered by token holder OX17. Go to the OX17 page. Yeah, right there. Filtered by token holders. Left, left, left. Up.
Oh,
yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's it. Is that Eternal Proxy Storage? If you click contract, it looks like it with relay tokens. Yeah. So
where's the?
So if you just click on like the token holdings page, like the wallet thing, up, down. Yeah.
Oh, right here. Okay.
So,
let's put this in the chat. So this is. Are we looking at the funds that have been on? These are funds that have been bridged over from Ethereum onto PulseChain?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah. And something that like, there are a couple things I've been trying to like dig into. One of them is some analysis on like the full comprehensive AMM bot activity. So the way I'm trying to do that is to analyze the contract events that took place in between the block that the fork block and the first block that users started broadcasting transactions. So because like when you look at the contract event or just like the chain events, a whole lot of activity happened right when it launched that I think was part of the AMM bot stuff. And so I'm trying to look into that information. And then also I'm trying to get a more comprehensive look at like the inflows and what assets that they hold so that we can kind of characterize like, okay, so, like of all the holders of Pepe, what, like, did they bridge in new stable coins or new ETH, or did they only bridge in their Pepe that they got a copy of? So like trying to characterize the, trying to do that. So yeah, he's not. So if you click the wallet, so like the little wallet next to token holdings, yeah, that shows.
Okay, gotcha. So this is where we can see. So 142 million in assets have been bridged over.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at. Okay, put this in the chat.
Yeah. So.
And we are assuming none of that was from Richard or the OA.
Yeah, like if it was 30 million was sent in, out of the Tornado Cash. I mean, it's impossible to know. None of the PulseX sacrifice or any of those addresses related to either of the sacrifice addresses have sent funds in. Who knows with the ETH, but.
Very interesting. And we'll tweet this out as well. I feel like, did Richard tweet this out before, or somehow I feel like this is. I haven't seen this link around a lot, but it should be like one of those, bookmark things, easy to find, and just go look up and see.
I think people track the numbers on PLS burn, but I think that only shows ETH, DAI, USDC, Tether, and Hex. But yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very, very informative. And what if these numbers go up? What if they go down? What does it mean? What does it mean? More stuff being bridged in? Do we think it's that good for price and things being bridged out bad for price? I know Pulse well tracks all this stuff too. How do you guys think about that? We'll wrap up on that one.
Yeah, I mean, stuff bridged in, it's like that's potential demand. And stuff bridged out, it usually means that, something was sold to get the thing that was bridged out. And so, with there's some guy who doxed his address, one of the big Pepe holders, because he's like, oh, thanks for the 55 ETH. and then you could like see it, because you could see a transaction from there out to a user in 55 ETH right around that time. So, funds bridged out is like because what he was doing, if you think about it, if he had his Pepe copy, Pepe price is pumping, he sells it. I think the largest pool at the time was PLS. So he's selling the Pepe for PLS. That PLS was previously not for sale versus any dollars or any stablecoin.
Mm-hmm.
But now that the PLS, which was bidding on Pepe in the liquidity pool, now that PLS is not bidding on Pepe, and now that PLS is bidding for stables, just because I think he did it in ETH, so he sold the PLS for ETH, then bridged out the ETH. So, like selling the copy of the coin and bridging the funds out, because most of the liquidity is in PLS on those coins, especially when it's incentivized. The selling of any of these copies is effectively net sell pressure on PLS.
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing was, he was actually the largest liquidity provider. Like, he was providing the liquidity for months for the PPP. So.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
So would it be intentional that he sold it and tried to capitulate? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So more stuff. What would be good? Yeah. Okay. One more, and I got a hard stop here though too. But I'm just curious on this. What would be a sign? PulseChain go up, PulseX go up. Is there a bridging activity? Is it more stable coins? Is it more? I mean, Hex, maybe bridged in Hex is good for Hex, but how do you think about like what is good for price go up for PulseChain and PulseX?
Yeah, like bridged funds in, for sure.
But not like a ton of Pepe bridged in, but that doesn't die.
Yeah, like that doesn't necessarily. I mean, maybe if people are swapping in like their tokens on ETH, bridging that in, and then swapping that for PLS, maybe in some, but probably the more direct way that for boosted values of the majors is bridged in dry powder, meaning ETH and stablecoins.
Boom.
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean,
good. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I agree with him. Yep, like ETH, BTC, and stablecoin. That's it, because they got enough liquidity from the outside to bridge in to bring in real value, so we could pump the whole ecosystem.
I'll be keeping my eye on the number of bridged in if it goes up or down, especially in those categories, because that should be that'll be fun. That'll be fun. Guys, excellent conversation. PulseChain Warchest. Great to have Mike on the show for the first time. Dip Catcher back for the 7th or 8th or one of those. I'm not sure. I have folders describing the number of times, but he's a VP. He's an OG on the show. We'll say it like that. All right, where can guys? Yeah, of course, man. Where can people find you and learn more about your stuff?
So you can follow my Twitter, OG Mike Crypto. It's on the screen. And I tweet a lot, so if you got some time, you want to take a look, and we could discuss about more issues or more directions about PulseChain in the future. Yeah.
So many controversial, unpopular opinions, especially that one.
Yep.
Cool stuff, man. Yeah. How about you, Dip Catcher?
Tanto Nominai on Twitter.
No meanie.
YouTube Dip Catcher. Follow some Maximus_DAO. And
just follow you on Twitter and just like look at the products that you just put out like every other day. It's just you and
like the one I just put out before we got on the stream.
You probably put one out like during the stream. You were like, hold on, I got 5 minutes not to talk. Let me go release this thing.
Minutes ago. Yeah, just like an alert system. I set it up for myself, but I made it so that anyone can get the alerts as well. It's like
you got a link. I'll put it up there real quick.
Yeah, it is Ink
Good.
Pool alerts. Anvil.app. I think that's it.
Perfect. All right, everyone. The latest Maximus DAO product. Go check it out. These guys are killing it. And Did catch your alarm just went off? Whew. Okay. All right. We'll get to those alarms.
All right, that's good to know that it works.
There you go. There you go.
That was the first
Yeah,
one.
confirmation on stream. There we go. Awesome, guys. All right, everyone. We're out. Hope you enjoyed the stream. If you just got here, hashtag replay gang, rewind. Excellent deep dive. Appreciate all the information. We like transparency here. We want the people democratize information, products, all that stuff. That's what I like, at least. Anyways, all right, guys. Scivive 5555. We are out.